She didn't plan it, she didn't want it. She needed it, and that difference is everything. The night it happened, Sade Balogun had been on her feet for 9 hours. The Grandeur Hotel smelled of money, cedar wood polish, expensive cologne, the faint ghost of cigars, and she had scrubbed every corner of it until her knuckles cracked. Her uniform was damp at the collar. Her feet ached inside shoes she'd bought 2 sizes too big because they were the only ones on sale. She was 24 years old and felt 60. Her phone buzzed inside her apron pocket at 11:47 p.m. She almost didn't answer. She should have kept moving. There were still towels to deliver, a corridor on the 14th floor that needed mopping, and a supervisor named Mr. Bode who made a sport of finding reasons to dock her pay. But something pulled at her, some thread she couldn't explain. She stepped behind a linen cart and pressed the phone to her ear. Miss Balogun, the voice on the other end was flat, clinical, a man she didn't know. Yes. This is Dr. Akin from Lagos General. I'm calling about your mother, Mrs. Funk Balogun. Her hand tightened on the phone. She passed away at 11:15 this evening. We're very sorry for your loss. The cart in front of her blurred. The cedar smell turned sharp in her throat. She pressed her free hand flat against the wall to keep herself upright, and the wall was cold, and she was glad for it, because everything else in her body was falling. Miss Balogun, are you there? Yes, her voice came out smaller than she expected. Yes, I'm here. She hung up before he could say anything else. She walked to the end of the corridor, found the supply closet, stepped inside, pulled the door shut behind her and sat down on the floor between a shelf of cleaning fluid and a stack of folded hand towels, and she cried the kind of cry that has no sound, mouth open, shoulders shaking, chest burning, and no air coming. Her mother, her only person. She sat there for 6 minutes. She counted later because she always counted things when the world was falling apart. It gave her something to hold. Then she stood up, dried her face on a hand towel and went back to work, because what else was there? It was the supervisor's idea to send her to the penthouse floor. A VIP delivery, fresh towels, bottled water, a fruit arrangement the kitchen had put together. He handed her the cart with a look that said, "Don't embarrass me," and she took it with a look that said nothing at all. The penthouse elevator hummed. The doors opened to a corridor that felt like a different world, wider, softer lighting, carpet that swallowed sound. Suite 1401 was at the end. She knocked twice. No answer. She knocked again, louder. The door swung open. The man standing there was tall, dark suit, collar open, no tie. His hair was slightly disheveled and his eyes were a fraction too unfocused to be entirely sober, but his posture was still straight, the kind of straight that had been trained into a body over years. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read, not dismissive, not unkind, just assessing. "Room service," she said. He stepped aside. She wheeled the cart in. The suite was vast, floor-to-ceiling windows showing the city like a painting, a sitting area with furniture that probably cost more than her yearly salary, a half-empty bottle of scotch on the coffee table. She set the towels in the bathroom, arranged the water and fruit on the dining surface, moved quickly. She wanted to be gone. "You've been crying," he said. She stopped. He was standing near the window now, glass in hand, watching her with that same unreadable expression. "I'm fine," she said. "I didn't say you weren't." She turned to face him properly for the first time. He was younger than she'd initially thought, maybe early 30s. There was a weariness behind his eyes that had nothing to do with the scotch. "My mother died tonight," she said. She had no idea why she said it. Maybe because she was tired of pretending. Maybe because he was a stranger and strangers don't carry your words anywhere. Something shifted in his expression, not pity, something more careful than that. "I'm sorry," he said. "The burial is in 4 days. I don't have the money." She pressed her lips together. She hadn't meant to say that either. The words had just fallen out. She reached for the cart handle. "How much?" he asked. She looked at him. "The burial, how much do you need?" The silence in the room changed texture. She understood what he was asking, or rather, she understood what the question opened the door to. She was 24 and exhausted, and her mother was dead, and she had 217 naira in her account, and rent was due in 11 days. She told him the number. He looked at her for a long moment. She held his gaze. She didn't beg. She didn't soften it. "All right," he said. She made herself stay present for every second of what followed. She refused to disappear inside her own head. She owed herself that much, the dignity of not pretending she wasn't there. When it was over, she lay staring at the ceiling in a room that cost more per night than she made in a month, and she felt strange and sad and grateful and ashamed, and all of those feelings were true at the same time. He didn't speak, she didn't either. At some point, she must have slept. She woke at 4:58 a.m. The room was still dark. He was asleep on the far edge of the bed, turned away from her. On the bedside table, her phone screen showed a bank alert. She checked it, and her breath caught. The full amount plus extra. She dressed in silence, gathered her things, paused at the door. She didn't know his name. She left. She buried her mother on a Thursday in a plot at Ikoradu Cemetery, under a sky the color of old pewter. There were 8 people at the funeral, 4 neighbors, a distant aunt who smelled of camphor and said very little, the pastor, and Sade's childhood friend Daniel Kareem, who drove 3 hours to be there and stood beside her without saying a single unnecessary word. "You doing okay?" he asked as the last prayer was said. "No," she said. "Yeah," he put his arm around her shoulders. "That's the right answer." She didn't cry. She had used up her tears on the hotel floor. On the walk back to the gate, her phone rang. Unknown number. "Miss Balogun, this is Crestmark Holdings. We received your application for the junior administrative assistant position. We'd like to invite you for an interview. This Friday, 10 a.m. She stopped walking. She had applied to 12 companies in the last month and heard from none of them. She almost told the woman on the phone she had the wrong person, but she said, "Yes, I'll be there," and hung up and stood very still for a moment and thought, maybe the world is not entirely finished with me. Crestmark Holdings occupied the top 6 floors of a glass tower in Victoria Island that made you feel small just looking at it. Sade arrived 20 minutes early in her best skirt, black, slightly faded, carefully pressed, and sat in a lobby with a waterfall feature and furniture that seemed designed to make people feel they did not quite belong. She got the job. It was a junior position, filing, scheduling, coordinating meeting rooms, but it was real, and it paid 3 times what the hotel paid, and she started the following Monday. She told herself she would be careful. She would be invisible. She would keep her head down and be grateful. What she did not expect was for the building to swallow her whole on day 1. The administrative floor was run in practice by a woman named Vanessa Reed. Vanessa was 35, wore her hair in a high bun so tight it seemed to pull her face into a permanent expression of contempt, and had been at Crestmark for 7 years. She had decided, before Sade even sat down at her new desk, that she did not like her. "The printer queue," Vanessa said, dropping a stack of files on Sade's desk without looking at her. "Clear it, then reorder the boardroom folders, then call facilities about the broken AC unit on 18, in that order." "Good morning," Sade said. Vanessa looked at her for the first time. "Excuse me." "Good morning," Sade repeated pleasantly. "I just thought we should acknowledge each other as human beings before you give me my task list." Vanessa's eyes went cold. She picked up the files and dropped them again harder. "Printer, boardroom, facilities, in that order." She walked away. By noon, Sade had been spoken over in a meeting, had her coffee mug moved from her desk without explanation. and discovered that her computer login had been set up with the wrong access permissions. Something that would have taken 30 seconds to fix, but that Vanessa managed to leave unresolved for 3 hours. There was also a woman named Bianca Hale who appeared at 1 p.m. in an outfit that probably cost more than Sade's monthly rent. Bianca didn't work at Crestmark. She had, someone whispered, been coming to the office for months. She seemed to believe she had a claim on the building itself, moving through the corridors with the confidence of someone who had already been told she was the most important person in the room. She stopped at Sade's desk on the way to the executive floor. "You're new," she said. "Yes." "Where are you from originally? Your accent is." "Lagos," Sade said. Bianca smiled, the kind of smile that didn't touch any part of her face above her lips. "How sweet." She moved on. Sade stared at her screen and counted to 10, slowly. On Thursday of that first week, everything changed. She was in the copy room, reprinting a report that had come out with a misaligned margin, when she heard voices in the corridor. She would have thought nothing of it, except that one of the voices stopped her cold. She knew that voice. She turned. Adrian Cole, CEO of Crestmark Holdings, cover of 3 business magazines in the last year, the most photographed executive in Nigeria's financial sector, was walking down the corridor with his head of legal, mid-conversation, carrying the same kind of weariness in his eyes that she had seen by lamplight in a hotel room. He saw her at the same moment she saw him. His steps didn't falter, his expression didn't change, but something in his posture tightened by a single degree, and for one long second they simply looked at each other. Then his gaze moved back to the man beside him. "Continue," he said. She turned back to the printer. Her hands, she noticed, were steady. She was proud of that. By the following Monday, something in the office had shifted. She couldn't name it precisely, but Vanessa's cruelties became slightly more public. A dismissive comment in front of the whole admin team, a task assigned and then immediately reassigned to someone else while Sade was in the middle of it, a meeting invitation rescinded without explanation. It felt like a message. It felt like warning. On Tuesday afternoon, Sade was standing in the conference room arranging folders for a 3 p.m. board presentation when Bianca walked in with 2 of her friends. They weren't staff. They had no reason to be in that room, but Bianca sat down in the chair at the head of the table, Adrian's chair, and looked around with a smile. "These folders are in the wrong order," she said. Sade looked at the folders. They were exactly right. "They're in date order," Sade said, "as requested." "Well, I do them alphabetically," Bianca said, "but what would you know?" "Enough to be employed here," Sade said, and gathered the last folder from the table with a calm she absolutely did not feel. That was when Adrian Cole walked in. The room shifted. Everyone shifted. He had that kind of gravity, not performed, just present. He looked at Bianca first, with an expression that was perfectly neutral and somehow deeply unwelcoming. "Bianca, this is a board meeting prep room. You don't have clearance to be here." Bianca stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Adrian, I was just." "Security will show you out, thank you," he turned to Sade. "The folders, are they ready?" She kept her face even. "Yes, Mr. Cole." "Good." He picked up one of the folders, opened it, reviewed the first page. "You arranged these in date order." "Yes." "That's exactly right." He put it down. "Thank you." He walked out. Bianca followed less steadily. The room was very quiet. That evening, Sade sat in the bathroom of her small apartment in Yaba, her mother's old apartment, too big now, too quiet, and stared at the thin blue line on the test she had bought at the pharmacy on her lunch break. Pregnant. She sat with that word for a long time. Then she put the test face down on the sink and went to make tea, because she didn't know what else to do. She went to see him. She had spent 2 days deciding not to, and then deciding she had no choice. She wrote and discarded 4 different scripts in her head. In the end, she simply went to his office on a Thursday afternoon when Vanessa was in a meeting and asked his personal assistant if she could speak with Mr. Cole. "Do you have an appointment?" "No." "Then tell him it's Sade Balogun. He'll see me." She was not sure why she said that. She was less sure why it worked. His office was on the top floor, wide windows, a desk that looked like a slab of dark wood floating in space. He was standing when she came in, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbows, a phone in his hand. He sat down when he saw her. The door closed behind her. Neither of them said anything for a moment. "I assume this isn't about the filing system," he said. "I'm pregnant." She let the words stand on their own, no softening, no apology. She watched him. She had promised herself she would watch him. His face did something complicated, a sequence of responses moving too fast to catch, and then stilled. "Is it?" "Yes," she said. "There hasn't been anyone else." Another silence. "Sit down," he said. "I'd rather stand." He looked at her. "Okay." He moved to the window, stood with his back to the city. "Are you planning to keep it?" "Them," she said. He turned. "What?" "The scan I had yesterday. There are 2 heartbeats." She reached into her bag and set the ultrasound image on the edge of his desk. Twins. She watched that land. She watched him grip the window frame behind him. "I'm not asking you for anything," she said. "I want to be clear about that. I'm not here to make demands or cause a scene. I came because you deserve to know. That's all." "Sade," his voice had changed, quieter. "Sit down, please." She sat. He sat across from her, and for the first time since she had known him, which was not long, and which she was fully aware was not the same as knowing him, he looked uncertain. "My grandmother," he said. "She has been pushing me to. There are expectations, a legitimate heir, a public marriage. It's been a source of pressure for 2 years." Sade looked at him. "That sounds like a you problem." His mouth curved very slightly. "It is, but it's about to become relevant." He leaned forward. "I want to propose something, not a real marriage, a contract, 2 years, public-facing. You'd live at my residence, attend events, be seen as my wife. At the end of the term, you leave with full financial support for you and the children, education, housing, everything for life." She stared at him. "You're serious," she said. "I'm always serious." "You're asking me to perform a marriage, so your grandmother doesn't disapprove of you." "I'm offering you and your children permanent security in exchange for 2 years of your time." He held her gaze. "I understand if the answer is no." She stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the city below, traffic, heat, the glitter of glass buildings, the distant gray of the lagoon. She thought about her mother, about the hotel corridor, about the bathroom floor and the ultrasound and Vanessa's face and Bianca's smile. She thought about what life looked like with no safety net and 2 children and a junior salary and this city pressing in from all sides. She turned around. "You don't control where I go," she said, "inside the house or outside it." "Agreed. I keep working here, at this company at my level fairly." "Agreed. The children are mine. You're their biological father, but you have no claim that I haven't consented to." Something moved in his expression. "Agreed, for now." "For now." People change their minds. I'd like to leave room for that. She looked at him for a long time. 2 years, she said. 2 years. She picked up her bag. "Send the contract to me in writing. I want a lawyer to review it before I sign anything." He blinked just once. "Of course." She moved toward the door. "Sade," he said. She stopped. "I know this isn't what either of us planned." She thought about a rain-soaked hospital corridor, a phone call, a floor in a supply closet, a stranger's ceiling at 5 in the morning. She thought about 2 heartbeats on a screen. "No," she said, "it isn't." She left. The house was not what she expected, and she had expected a lot. It was a compound in Ikoyi, gated, landscaped, with an interior that someone with actual taste had decorated in warm tones and clean lines. Her room was larger than her entire apartment. The bathroom had a tub. There was a garden she could see from her window, with a fountain that made a sound like rain. She stood in the doorway of her room with her 2 suitcases and thought, "This is temporary. Remember that." The first morning, she came downstairs to find Adrian already dressed at the kitchen island, reading something on a tablet, a cup of black coffee at his elbow. He looked up. "There's a chef. She comes at 7 and leaves at 9. Breakfast is in the warmer." "Thank you." She moved to the coffee maker. He watched her for a moment, then looked back at his tablet. "We have an event Saturday, the Meridian Gala, quarterly black tie. My grandmother will be there." "Understood. You'll need to be ready." She turned to look at him. "Ready how?" "Comfortable in that environment." "Mr. Cole," she said, "I've spent the last 4 years cleaning up after people in that environment. I know exactly how it works." He was quiet for a moment. "I suppose you do." She poured her coffee and carried it to the table and sat down across from him, and they ate breakfast in a silence that was, she would admit later, not entirely uncomfortable. The gala was harder. She wore a dress they had arranged through a stylist, deep burgundy, structured, exactly the kind of thing that said "I belong here" without shouting it. She had done her own hair. Adrian arrived at her door at 7:15 and stopped when he saw her. "You look," he said, and then didn't finish the sentence. "Presentable," she offered. "Yes," he said, which somehow felt like more. In the car, he briefed her. Names to know, questions to deflect, how to handle his grandmother. "What is she like?" Sade asked. "Exacting," he said. "She sees everything. She will test you." "What kind of test?" "The kind where she acts like she isn't testing you." "I've met that woman before," Sade said. "She was my secondary school headmistress." He glanced at her. Something that was almost a smile crossed his face and disappeared. Matriarch Evelyn Cole was 71 years old and looked like a woman who had decided decades ago that age was not going to diminish her, and had held firm to that decision every single day since. She wore ivory and sat at the center of every room she entered, and when her eyes landed on Sade, they stayed there measuring, calculating, filing. "So," she said, "you're the one." "Sade Balogun," Sade said, and offered her hand. Evelyn looked at the hand, then shook it. Her grip was very firm. "Your people are from where?" "My mother was from Ondo. My father, I don't know." Not a flinch, not an apology, just the truth cleanly delivered. Evelyn's gaze sharpened fractionally. "Honest at least. I don't see much point in being anything else. Most people in this room would disagree with you." "I know," Sade said. "That's why I can still sleep at night." Evelyn looked at her for a long moment. Then she turned to Adrian and said, "She'll do," and walked away. Adrian leaned close to Sade's ear. "That is the warmest thing she has ever said about anyone I've brought to one of these." "I'm thrilled," Sade murmured. "You should be." At the office, things escalated. Vanessa had clearly decided that Sade's new status word had traveled fast, the way it always does in closed buildings, made her more of a threat, not less. The bullying became sharper. A report Sade had prepared was submitted under Vanessa's name. An email Sade sent was intercepted and replied to by Vanessa before Sade saw the response, creating a confusion that nearly cost a client a deadline. During a team briefing, Vanessa cut Sade off mid-sentence 3 times, and each time looked at the room to see who would do anything about it. Nobody did. Bianca, meanwhile, had taken to appearing on the administrative floor several times a week with gifts for Vanessa, coffees, lunches, the currency of alliance. "They make sense together," Daniel said when Sade told him over the phone that evening. "Mean girls find each other. It's like a homing signal. I'm not going to complain to HR, Sade said. It looks weak. Sade, it looks like documentation. It looks like I can't handle myself. Or it looks like you have evidence. She was quiet. How are you feeling, physically, I mean? Tired, my ankles are starting to swell. Are you eating? Daniel. I'm going to ask, every time, until someone else is asking you. She didn't say anything to that. Outside her window, the fountain in the garden made its rain sound, and she sat with the phone against her ear and felt, for one unguarded moment, something close to grateful. It was a Thursday, 3 weeks into the arrangement, when everything cracked open. Sade had been sent to retrieve a batch of archived files from the storage level, 2 floors below the administrative suite. The room was used for physical document storage. Long metal shelving, no windows, temperature-controlled to protect the paper. She went down alone. She found the files. She was heading back to the elevator when she heard the door close behind her, and then the click of the lock. She turned, tried the handle, tried it again. She went to the light switch, flipped it, nothing happened. The temperature in the room was set for paper storage, not for people. She could feel it already, the chill creeping in through her thin blouse, settling in her joints. She went to her phone. No signal. 1 bar that disappeared before she could send a message. She knocked on the door, shouted, called out. Nothing. She sat on the floor because standing was making her lightheaded, and she put her back against the door and breathed slowly and talked to her children. Told them they were fine. She was fine. This was nothing. This was temporary because she needed to say it out loud to believe it. She was there for 47 minutes. When the door opened, it opened fast, and Adrian was on the other side, and the expression on his face was not one she had seen before. He wasn't composed. He wasn't calculating. He was scared. He crossed the room and crouched in front of her where she sat on the floor, and he put his hands on her arms, not grabbing, just holding, like he needed to check that she was real. Are you hurt? Are you the Bobbies? We're fine, she said. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. We're okay. He exhaled. Something moved through his whole body, a releasing of something he had been holding very tight. Who was in charge of this floor today? He said, to the man standing in the doorway behind him. The man named Vanessa. Adrian stood up. He was very quiet for a moment. Then he turned to the man. She's terminated, effective now. Clear her access and remove her from the building. He turned back to Sade and offered her his hand. She took it. He didn't let go until they reached the elevator. Something between them changed after that. She couldn't have named it precisely if someone had asked her to. It wasn't warmth exactly. He was still controlled, still reserved, still a man who said exactly as much as he intended and no more. But there were new things. He stopped disappearing after dinner. He started asking her in the morning how she had slept. When she mentioned that the pregnancy was making the stairs difficult on some mornings, a railing appeared on the staircase she hadn't noticed before, and she hadn't asked for it, and neither of them mentioned it. She found him one evening sitting on the bench in the garden with his jacket off, looking at nothing in particular. "Can I sit?" she asked. He looked up almost surprised. "Of course." She sat beside him. The fountain made its sound. The garden was soft in the evening light. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask," he said. "Why have you never married? Actually married, I mean. You're 32. You're the most eligible person in 3 countries, apparently. Why haven't you?" He was quiet for a moment. "The women who wanted to marry me wanted to marry what I represent, not who I am." "What are you?" He looked at her. "What are you?" she repeated. "Not the company, not the magazines. What are you?" He looked back at the garden. Someone who finds it very difficult to trust people. Someone who was taught from childhood that feeling things openly was a liability. Someone who is, he paused, working on that. She nodded slowly. My mother used to say that people who don't cry in public cry twice as much in private. Was she right? Usually, Sade said, she was right about most things. A silence, a good one. I'm sorry she died, he said. I know I said that before, I want to say it again. She looked at her hands in her lap. Thank you. She raised you well. She raised me fierce, Sade said. I'm still working on well. His mouth curved, he looked at her. She looked at him. And for a second, just one, the whole arrangement, the contract, the pretending, the careful distance, all of it felt very far away. Then a car alarm went off somewhere beyond the gate and the moment passed, and they both looked away, and she stood up and said good night and went inside. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling and told herself, 2 years, that's what this is, 2 years. The trouble with trouble is that it rarely comes one thing at a time. 3 weeks later, a woman named Mrs. Mensah appeared. She came to the house, having somehow obtained the address, and presented herself to the gate guard as a family member of Sade's. She had with her a young woman she called Tara, who had Sade's coloring and some approximation of Sade's bone structure, and who looked at Sade with an expression that managed to be both searching and rehearsed. "You're my sister," Tara said when they were brought to the sitting room. Our mother gave you up when you were a baby, to your aunt in Lagos. She never stopped thinking about you." Sade looked at her. "My mother was Funk Balogun. She raised me from birth. She never mentioned a sister." "She didn't know," Mrs. Mensah said. "The adoption was private. These things were done differently then." "I'd need documentation," Sade said. "We can provide." "DNA," Sade said. "A laboratory test, nothing else." There was a shift in the room. Tara looked at Mrs. Mensah. Mrs. Mensah's hands folded tightly in her lap. "That seems extreme," Mrs. Mensah said. "Does it?" Sade said. "You come to my home claiming family. DNA is the minimum." Adrian had been standing in the doorway. He had come home mid-conversation and had simply waited, watching. Now he said, "I'll have our legal team arrange the test. If the results are what you say they are, we'll discuss everything further. If not," he left the rest of the sentence in the air. They agreed to the test. They shouldn't have. The results came back 10 days later. No biological connection. Not a cousin, not a half-sibling, nothing. Mrs. Mensah stopped answering her phone the day after the results arrived. Tara, as it turned out, had a small-time social media presence and had been posting cryptic hints about a coming announcement. It dissolved into nothing. But Dr. Kola Mensah, the doctor who had been quietly present at several of Sade's prenatal appointments, who had seemed to appear at a few too many accidental moments, was a different matter. He came to see her without preamble on a Tuesday morning at a cafe near the office and said, "I think you should know that your mother, your late mother, Mrs. Funk Balogun, was not your biological mother." Sade set down her cup. "She raised you. She loved you. That is not in question," he said. "But she took you in at 6 weeks old from a woman who could not keep you. The woman was from a family you would recognize." "What family?" Sade asked. He told her. She sat with that information for a long time. It was a name that meant something in Lagos. Old money. The kind of family that appeared in the society pages of magazines and on hospital wings and university buildings. The kind of family whose name opened doors and created complications in equal measure. She drove to Adrian's office that evening and sat across from him and told him. He listened without interrupting, which was something she had come to value about him. The way he gave silence its full weight. "Does it change anything for you?" he asked when she finished. "I don't know yet." "What do you need from me?" She looked at him across the desk. It was not a question she had expected. Not this version of it, straightforward, genuine, with no calculation in it. "Time," she said, "to think." "You have it." She stood up to leave. "Sade." She stopped. Whatever that family is, whatever that means, it doesn't change who you are. You understand that?" She turned. He was looking at her directly, no performance in it. "I know," she said quietly. "I just needed to hear someone else say it." Daniel found out the same week. He had been investigating on her behalf, quietly, carefully, the way Daniel did everything, and he called her on a Friday night with a full picture. "The family knew about you," he said. "Or some of them did. There was a legal consultation years ago. Someone tried to track your mother down. Your mother, Funk, she moved them out of Ibadan after that. I think she was protecting you." Sade closed her eyes. Of course she was. "Daniel." "Yeah. Thank you for doing this." "Always," he said, then quietly. "I love you, you know, not as a friend, I mean I have for a long time. I thought you should know in case." He stopped. "I just thought you should know." She held the phone for a moment. "Daniel. You don't have to say anything. I just needed it out of my body." "I know," she said softly. "I know." What she didn't know was that Adrian had come into the kitchen, quiet as he always was, and had heard the end of that call. She saw his expression before he had time to arrange it. She saw it, the tightening jaw, the carefully controlled blankness, the thing underneath the blankness that he almost managed to hide. "I should let you," he started. "You weren't eavesdropping," she said. "It's your kitchen." Still, he moved past her toward the coffee maker. His movements were fractionally less easy than usual. "He's a friend," she said. "He's been a friend for 15 years. I know," pause, "he's in love with you." "I know. Are you?" "No," she said. She said it before she'd finished deciding to say it. But it was true. It was completely true, and the truth of it surprised her. The silence in the kitchen was different from the other silences. It had a shape to it, a temperature. "Okay," he said. He poured his coffee. Then, without looking at her, "Good." She looked at his back, at the line of his shoulders, at the way he was holding himself very still. "Adrian." He turned. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, "for whatever that's worth." Something in his face opened, just briefly, just enough. "It's worth a great deal," he said. The Meridian Annual Summit was the event of the quarter, larger than the gala, higher stakes. Every significant figure in Lagos's financial and social world in attendance. Adrian's keynote address was scheduled for 7:30 p.m. Sade stood beside him during the arrivals, in a gown she had chosen herself this time, deep green, unhurried, exactly right, and felt the difference in how she moved through this world compared to 3 months ago. Then, between the cocktail reception and the main event, Vanessa appeared. She had clearly been invited by someone who wanted to cause trouble, a fact that would be confirmed later. She walked towards Sade with a smile that had something vicious underneath it, and behind her was Bianca, and between them they had clearly decided that this was the moment. "Congratulations," Vanessa said. "On the arrangement, very clever." Sade looked at her pleasantly. "Thank you. I hope you've saved what he pays you. It won't last." "Vanessa," Sade said, "you were escorted out of the building by security for locking a pregnant woman in a refrigerated room. I would find something else to do with your energy tonight." A ripple went through the small group nearby. People were listening. They always were. Bianca stepped in. "You don't belong here. Any of this could be taken away in a second. You're nobody. You were cleaning hotel rooms 6 months ago." "I was," Sade said, "and I saved enough from that job to bury my mother with dignity. I'm proud of that." She held Bianca's gaze. "Can you say the same about anything you've done recently?" Then Adrian's voice came from behind her. "Bianca, Vanessa." His voice was even and completely final. He stepped beside Sade, not in front of her, beside her, and his posture said everything. "I'd like you both to leave this event. Security will be asked not to let you re-enter." He turned, and with one hand resting briefly at the small of Sade's back, he guided her forward. "We have a program to attend." The room watched them move through it. Sade kept her shoulders back and her chin level and her face perfectly calm, and underneath that she was holding a kind of feeling she couldn't quite name, something that was not triumph and not relief, but something in between. They sat side by side for the keynote. His speech was excellent. She had read the draft, had quietly suggested 2 changes that he had incorporated without comment, and then thanked her for the next morning. Watching him at the podium, she thought, he is a remarkable man who has spent a very long time making sure nobody notices that. In the car on the way home, they didn't speak for several minutes. Then he said, "You didn't need me to step in back there." "No," she agreed. "But I wanted to." She looked at the city moving past the window. "I know." "This is different from what I proposed," he said. She turned to look at him. "What I said in my office, 2 years, a public arrangement, that was the original proposition." He kept his eyes forward. "This is different, what this is now. I don't think it fits the original description anymore." "What does it fit?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment, long enough that she thought he might not answer. "I don't know what to call it," he said. "I only know that when you were in that room, that storage room, I have never moved that fast in my life. And it wasn't because of the contract." She felt the car's warmth and the dark of the road, and the weight of everything that had passed between them. "The children," she said carefully, "you've been asking about them. At every appointment you've been available for, you've been there." "Yes." "That wasn't in the contract either." "No," he said, "it wasn't." They arrived home. The gate opened. The fountain was running in the dark garden. She got out of the car and walked to the front door and waited while he came beside her, and she said, "What are you trying to tell me, Adrian?" He looked at her, really looked at her, the way she had first looked at him, back when she was trying to decide what kind of man he was. Something in her chest tightened. "That I don't want this to end in 2 years," he said. "That I want whatever comes after with you, with them." She breathed. "I know that's not what you signed up for," he said. "I know you came into this with conditions and a lawyer and every right to walk away at the end. I'm not making a demand. I'm telling you the truth, because you told me once that you'd rather be told the truth." "I did," she said softly. "So there it is." The garden fountain made its rain sound. The night was warm. Inside her, 2 small heartbeats were becoming 2 small people who would one day want to know the story of how they began, and she would have to find a way to tell it that held all of it, the grief and the desperation and the cold room and the bench in the garden, and all the mornings that had built quietly into this one. She thought, "I have spent 6 months learning to survive. Maybe it is time to try something else." "I'm not saying yes tonight," she said. "I know. I'm not ready to say yes tonight." "I understand. But I'm not saying no." She held his gaze. "I need you to know the difference." He nodded, slow, certain. "I know the difference." She opened the door, stepped inside, turned back once. He was still standing there in the warm dark, and he was looking at her the way someone looks at a thing they are no longer sure they deserve, which is a very honest kind of looking. "Good night, Adrian," she said. "Good night, Sade." She went upstairs. She sat on the edge of her bed. She put her hand on her stomach, round now, insistent, alive, and she thought about her mother, who had crossed the country to protect her from a family she never knew she had. She thought about the girl in the supply closet who had 6 minutes to cry and then went back to work. She thought about everything she had built herself into from nothing with nothing, and how that hadn't made her hard but had made her careful, which is different. She thought, "I am not the girl who needed saving anymore." She was the woman who chose. 6 weeks later, on a Saturday morning when the garden was green, and the twins were making their movements known in ways that made her catch her breath and laugh at the same time, Adrian Cole set down his coffee cup and reached into the pocket of his shirt and produced a ring. Not flashy, not enormous, a thin band with a single stone that caught the light in a quiet way, like it wasn't trying to prove anything. I told you, she said. I didn't say yes. You didn't say no. She looked at him across the kitchen island. The morning light was on his face and he was not performing anything, no strategy, no calculation, no careful management of how he appeared. He was just there in the kitchen, holding a ring, looking at her. This is a real proposal, she said. Yes. Not a contract. No. Not a strategy for your grandmother. She already approves of you. This has nothing to do with her. She came around the island. She stood in front of him. She looked at the ring in his hand. If I say yes, she said, I need you to understand what you're getting. I'm going to tell you when you're wrong. I'm going to take up space. I'm going to raise these children to know their own worth before they know anything else. I'm going to need you to be present, actually present, not strategically present. I know, he said. I'm going to bring chaos into your very organized life. You already have. His voice was soft. I find I don't mind. She looked at him for a long, quiet moment, long enough to feel the weight of everything behind her and the shape of everything ahead, long enough to be sure. Then she held out her hand. He slid the ring on. It fit. She looked at it, then she looked at him. Don't make me regret this, she said. He brought her hand to his mouth and pressed his lips to her knuckles. No theater to it, just a real and quiet thing. I'll spend considerable time making sure you don't, he said. And Sade Balogun, who had survived the worst nights of her life by counting the seconds, who had cleaned rooms where she could not afford to sleep, who had walked into a man's office with nothing but the truth and walked back out with 2 heartbeats in her own terms, Sade Balogun smiled. Soft, cautious, entirely her own. Not because she needed him, but because she chose him, and choice, after everything, felt like the most extraordinary luxury of all. If this story moved you, hit that like button. It helps more people find it. And if you want stories like this every week, subscribe and turn on notifications. Drop a comment and tell me, at what moment did you know Sade had truly won?